My name is Elara Quinn. I'm 31 years old, and 3 days ago, my mother called me crying for the first time in my life. She said she needed help. And before she finished the sentence, I already knew exactly what I was going to say back to her. Because 2 years ago, I was the one crying. I had just been told I had stage 3 ovarian cancer. And my mother answered me with a sentence I will never forget. Now isn't a good time. 6 months of chemotherapy, 34 hospital visits. Not one of them showed up. They were too busy planning my brother's wedding. But here's the part none of them ever expected me to understand. While I was losing my hair, my mother was quietly signing papers that would decide everything later. And one day, those papers came back to speak. Let me take you back. Before the diagnosis, my life looked stable. Not exciting, not loud, just steady. I worked as a legal assistant in a small estate planning firm. I spent my days reviewing wills, trust documents, asset transfers. Quiet work, precise work. The kind where mistakes cost people everything. I liked it. Because unlike my family, the rules made sense. Numbers didn't lie. Documents didn't pretend. People did. I lived alone in a small apartment I paid for myself. I handled everything. My bills, my schedule, my problems. And somehow I also handled theirs. I booked my mother's doctor appointments. I reviewed my brother Daniel's contracts. I was the one they called when something went wrong. Never when things were good. In my family, I wasn't the favorite. Daniel was. He was younger, married, already talking about kids. The future. The real family. I was the extra, the reliable one. The one who didn't need anything. Or at least, that's what they decided. So when the call came from my doctor that Tuesday afternoon, I already knew one thing: I was going to be alone. Still, I called my mother. I told her everything. Calmly, clearly. I have cancer. Stage 3. I start chemo in 2 weeks. There was silence. Then I heard voices in the background. Laughter, music samples, wedding planning. She sighed. Elara, we can't deal with this right now. That was it. No, I'm sorry. No, we'll be there. Just inconvenience. Then she added almost gently, Daniel's wedding is in 3 months. This is very stressful for him. I remember standing in the parking lot, phone pressed to my ear, feeling something inside me shift, not break, just go quiet. I said, okay. And that was the moment everything changed. Chemotherapy is a strange kind of war. It's quiet, repetitive, lonely. You sit in a chair while poison drips into your body, hoping it kills the right thing before it kills you. Most people don't sit alone. I did, every time. Around me, there were husbands holding hands, daughters reading to mothers, friends laughing too loudly to hide fear. And then there was me. One chair, one IV, no one beside me. Except, eventually, someone unexpected. Her name was Miriam Hale, 72, retired librarian, sharp eyes, softer voice. She sat beside me one afternoon and said, "You shouldn't answer emails while being poisoned. It encourages bad habits." I laughed. For the first time in weeks. After that, she stayed. Not because she had to, because she chose to. She drove me home when I couldn't. She brought tea when I couldn't eat. She sat with me on the worst nights when my body felt like it was breaking from the inside. And somewhere along the way, she said something I never forgot. Family is the people who stay. Meanwhile, my actual family stayed busy. Group chats filled with wedding photos, smiling faces, perfect moments. My absence never mentioned. Not once did anyone ask how I was. But they did post pictures of the house I grew up in. The one my mother always said would stay in the family. The real family. I didn't think much of it. Until one day, during a casual phone call, my mother said something strange. "Don't worry about the house. It's already taken care of." I hadn't asked. That was the moment something clicked. Because in my job, taken care of usually means one thing. A document exists. And documents don't lie. 3 days later, I searched the county records. It took less than 2 minutes. Address, search, enter. And there it was, a quitclaim deed. Dated 8 months earlier. Right in the middle of my chemotherapy. Transfer from my mother to my brother. Consideration, $1. $1. She had given him the house, the entire house. While telling me she couldn't help with my medical bills while I was fighting for my life alone, I printed it, folded it, put it in a folder, and said nothing. Because I understood something important in that moment. Facts don't need emotion, they just need time. I survived. That's the part no one in my family witnessed. Remission came quietly, no celebration, no applause, just a doctor saying no evidence of disease. And me, breathing again. I paid off my debt slowly, worked harder, studied more, built something solid, a life they knew nothing about. And then 2 years later, my mother called, crying, stroke, she couldn't walk properly, couldn't live alone, she needed care, daily care, full-time care. And suddenly, I was needed again. You've always been the strong one, she said. I recognized the sentence. It wasn't praise, it was assignment. The family moved fast. Daniel called the next morning, practical, efficient. You should move in with Mom, he said. It just makes sense, you're single, you don't have kids. There it was again, not love, availability. They weren't asking if I could, they were assuming I would, because I always had. A week later, they invited me over, family dinner. Let's discuss the situation. I knew what it was, an intervention, a performance. They would corner me, pressure me, make me say yes. So I went. The house looked better than I remembered. Renovated, expanded, beautiful. Daniel had done well with something that wasn't his. Inside, everything was set. My mother in a chair, relatives gathered, sympathy ready, expectation thick in the air. They thought they knew the ending. They didn't know I had already read the script. When the moment came, my brother spoke first. You'll help, right? He asked. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I reached into my bag, took out the folded paper, and placed it on the table. This, I said calmly, is a recorded deed. Silence. I continued. It shows that 2 years ago, during my chemotherapy, Mom transferred this house to you for $1. Daniel froze. My mother went pale. I kept going. In cases like this, when assets are transferred within 5 years of needing long-term care, there's a penalty period. I looked around the room. Roughly 30 months, during which Medicaid pays nothing. Now they were listening, really listening. That means someone pays out of pocket, I said, or the asset is returned. I slid the paper toward him. You own the asset. The room shifted. The pressure moved off me, onto him, exactly where it belonged. You're just being selfish, he snapped. I don't want the house, I said quietly. I want you to understand what comes with it. Then my mother spoke. Soft, fragile. I need you, she said, and for a moment I almost broke, because she was still my mother. But then I remembered the parking lot, the silence, the sentence. Now isn't a good time. So I gave her the same answer. Calm, steady, final. I can't help right now. And for the first time in my life, I meant it. I left that house with nothing. No shouting, no drama, just truth. And the quiet understanding that I was finally free. They fixed it eventually. Of course they did. The house was transferred back, care was arranged, responsibility redistributed, where it always should have been. As for me, I went home, made tea, and sat across from Miriam, my real family, the one who stayed. If you take anything from this, let it be this. Being available is not the same as being loved. And love is never a debt someone gets to collect from your life. For a few days after that night, everything was quiet, not peaceful, just still. Like the moment after a storm when the air feels heavy and something unseen is settling into place. No calls, no messages, no accusations, which in my family meant only one thing. They were thinking, and thinking for them usually meant calculating. A week later, Daniel called. Not angry this time. Careful. Measured. Elara, he said, like we were equals suddenly. We spoke to an attorney. Of course they had. People like my family don't apologize, they consult. And, I asked. There was a pause, then tighter. They said what you said is correct. I leaned back in my chair, looking at the ceiling of my apartment, the one I had kept, the one no one could take from me. The house needs to be transferred back, he continued, at least temporarily. Not returned, not fixed, temporarily. Even now, they were trying to hold on to something. That's up to you, I said evenly. Another pause. You're really not going to help? He asked, and this time there was something else in his voice. Not anger. Confusion. Like he genuinely couldn't understand how the system had stopped working. I already did, I said. You just didn't notice when it mattered. They transferred the house back 2 weeks later. No announcement, no apology, just paperwork. Because in the end, paperwork is the only language people like that truly respect. The same house that had been secured for the family was quietly reversed, like a mistake someone hoped wouldn't be remembered. But I remembered. Not because I was holding on to anger, because I had finally learned to pay attention. Care for my mother was arranged the expensive way. Professional caregivers, rotating shifts, costs split between Daniel and what little savings remained. I heard about it the way you hear about distant weather, Updates from relatives who suddenly found their voices again now that the crisis had structure. A shame how complicated things got, one aunt said over text. Complicated. That was the word they chose. Not cruel. Not unfair. Complicated. I didn't correct her. I didn't need to. My mother tried to call me again a month later. I let it ring. Then she texted, "I miss you." I stared at the message for a long time. Because for a moment, just a moment, it almost worked. That old pull. That instinct. The one that says, go back, fix it, make it right. But then I asked myself a question I hadn't known how to ask before. Miss what, exactly? The version of me that never said no. The one who showed up no matter how she was treated? The one who could be relied on without being valued? That person didn't exist anymore. So I typed back, I hope you're recovering well. Polite, distant, true. And that was all. Life didn't transform overnight after that. There was no sudden happiness, no dramatic glow-up moment. Healing doesn't work like that. It's quieter, slower, more deliberate. I kept working, took on more clients, started handling my own cases instead of assisting others. Families sat across from me every day, scared, confused, overwhelmed, and I guided them through decisions that would affect everything. And sometimes when they hesitated, when they said, we'll figure it out later, I would look at them and say gently, later has a cost. I never told them my story. I didn't have to. They could hear it anyway. Miriam stayed. Thursday dinners never stopped. Even when I was tired, even when she was. We made it a rule. Consistency over perfection. One evening, months later, she looked at me over her tea and said, "You're lighter." I frowned. "I lost weight during chemo. That doesn't count." She smiled. "That's not what I meant." I knew what she meant. For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying people who had never once tried to carry me, and it showed. About 6 months after the house was transferred back, I got one more call, this time from Daniel. He sounded different, not sharp, not defensive, just tired. "I didn't know," he said. No greeting, no build-up. I didn't understand what that transfer meant. I didn't answer right away, because I believed him. That was the hardest part. He hadn't done it out of strategy. He had done it out of assumption. The same assumption they all shared, that things would always work out, that someone, usually me, would absorb the cost. "I know," I said finally. Silence. Then, quietly, "I'm sorry. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't enough to undo anything. But it was real. And that mattered." "I appreciate that," I said, and I did. But appreciation isn't the same as access, and forgiveness isn't the same as going back. We didn't become close after that. We didn't rebuild anything dramatic. We settled into something honest. Occasional updates, neutral conversations, no expectations, no roles assigned, just distance that didn't hurt anymore. My mother never apologized, not really. She circled around it, mentioned how hard things had been, how scared she was, how everything had gotten out of hand, but never the words that mattered. And for the first time, I didn't wait for them. Because closure isn't something someone gives you, it's something you decide you no longer need. A year later, I drove past that house. Not on purpose, just wrong turn. It looked the same, almost, but smaller, less significant, like something I had outgrown without realizing it. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I just kept driving. And that was the moment I knew. I was done. Not angry, not hurt, just done. Here's the truth no one tells you. The hardest part isn't being abandoned. It's realizing you don't need the people who left. That's the part that changes everything. If you're listening to this and thinking about your own family, the one that only calls when they need something, the one that confuses your availability with your obligation, I want you to remember this. You are not a resource. You are not the backup plan. You are not the person who exists to make everyone else's life easier. And love, real love, doesn't show up only when it's convenient. I didn't win anything. I didn't take anything from them. I just stopped giving them access to me. And somehow that changed the entire equation. A house was signed away for $1. A truth was ignored for 2 years. And 4 words took me just as long to earn. I can't help either. Not out of anger. Out of understanding. And that was the moment I finally chose myself. The last time I heard her voice wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no accusations, no final explosion that would make everything feel justified. It was quiet. Fragile, even. "Elara," my mother said over the phone, her voice thinner than I remembered. "I just wanted to hear you. Not see you, not talk things through. Just hear me. I stood by the window, watching the city move like nothing had ever happened. Cars passing, have people laughing somewhere below, life continuing without hesitation. And for a moment, I closed my eyes. Because a year ago, that one sentence would have been enough. It would have pulled me right back in. I would have come running, explaining, fixing, giving, becoming who I used to be. But that version of me had already paid the price. "I'm glad you called," I said calmly, and I meant it. Silence stretched between us. Not uncomfortable, just honest. "You've changed," she whispered. I let out a small breath, almost a smile. "Yes," I said, "I have." She didn't ask me to come, didn't ask for money, didn't ask for anything at all. And somehow, that made it clearer than ever. For the first time in my life, there was nothing left to take. After the call ended, I didn't cry. That was the part that surprised me the most. No heaviness in my chest, no lingering guilt, no second-guessing every word I had said, just stillness. The kind that doesn't come from avoidance, but from resolution. A few weeks later, I received a letter. Not an email, not a message, a letter. Handwritten. My mother's handwriting hadn't changed. Careful, slightly slanted, controlled. Inside, there were no grand apologies, no dramatic confessions, just a single paragraph that stood out from everything else. "I didn't know how to love you without needing you." I read that line 3 times, not because I didn't understand it, but because I finally did. And that was enough. I folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and set it in a drawer. Not hidden, not displayed, just stored. Like something that belonged to the past, not the present. Life moved forward the way it always does, quietly, without asking for permission. I built my work, expanded my practice, started choosing cases I believed in, not just the ones that paid well, but the ones that mattered. People trusted me with their hardest moments, and I treated that trust differently now. Because I knew what it meant to be the person everyone depends on, and what it costs when no one stands behind you. Miriam asked me something once over dinner. "Do you ever wish things had turned out differently?" I thought about it, really thought about it. The house, the hospital, the silence, the years of giving without being seen. And then I shook my head. "No," I said, "because if they had been different, I wouldn't be." The truth is, nothing about my ending looked impressive from the outside. No big reconciliation, no emotional reunion, no moment where everything finally made sense for everyone. Just distance, clarity, and a life that no longer revolved around people who only remembered me when they needed something. Sometimes people think closure is a conversation, an apology, a final moment where everything is explained and resolved, but it isn't. Closure is a decision, a quiet one, the kind no one sees, but you feel every single day afterward. I didn't get the family I thought I had. I didn't get the apology I deserved. I didn't get justice in the way stories usually promise it. What I got instead was something far more valuable. I got out. And if there's one thing I know now, it's this. You can spend your entire life trying to prove your worth to people who have already decided not to see it, or you can walk away and let your life become the proof. So here's my question, not for them, for you. If love only shows up when you're useful, is it really love or just access?